Hi all, welcome back to Welded Daydreams. Done some more work on the jet bike, but I've got a few frequently asked questions I want to run through first. I've had a few people ask pretty valid questions about how certain things are going to operate, so we'll run through those real quick before I show you what I've done since last episode. First question I get a lot of is oil pressure. Turbos need oil pressure, how am I going to make that? I've experimented with running a power steering pump underdriven off the 6.5 horsepower engine, and then running that pressure through a fuel pressure regulator for running motor oil to the turbos, and that seems to work pretty well. I can dial in the pressure and get it pretty accurate and pretty steady over a range of RPM there. So that's my plan. I'll run it through the pressure regulator and then manifold it off into all 3.5 turbos and the reduction gearbox. What fuels are going to run on? Petrol. 6.5 horsepower engine runs on petrol, so the jet turbine is going to run on petrol too. Getting it in there is a little bit tricky, but I think I've figured out a way around that. I'll be running a Falcon air conditioning pump off the small engine, which is going to draw air fuel mixture through a minibite carb and inject it directly into the combustion chamber, and then the throttle blade on the carb will be actuated by a small pneumatic cylinder running off manifold absolute pressure. So that'll give me more fuel when the boost goes up, which is it's going to be a condition of what position the throttle is in, and it's going to wind up the boost and then add fuel as it needs to. Getting it tuned, that's going to be a different thing. I think I might actually have to take it to a dyno to get that done because I don't have the gear to do it here. May even start a GoFundMe or something to that effect to pay for the dyno tuning. Let me know if you think that that might be a good idea, if you'd be prepared to chip in for that one. Cooling, how am I going to keep the thing cool? I've got a lot of cooling sort of planned for it. So I've got a CBR 500 radiator that has a fan on it. That'll be pumped water through the air to water intercooler. The 3 compound turbos are also water cooled, and I've got an oil to water heat exchanger from a 6-speed Falcon. That'll all be pumped through a Toyota Price electric water pump, auxiliary electric water pump. I'll have to monitor that for flow and see if that's enough. I don't know if it will be, but I'll plumb it all up and see how it goes. Speaking of which, electric water pump, what's going to run that? Well, I thought of that too. I'll have a motorcycle battery and an electrical system to run that and the lights and gauges and things like that. That'll be charged by a 5-litre Falcon, weirdly enough, alternator. That'll be driven off the output for the turbine, so as not to draw any extra power from the small engine. The other question I've got is throttle response. Obviously gas turbines aren't particularly responsive on the throttle. Anyone who's flown a turbine airplane will know that. And it's a problem that means that gas turbine cars and motorcycles never really took off. You get pretty good power to weight, but no throttle response. So as a race car or a road car, they don't really work. We've already discussed back in episode 1 how I'm going to deal with the open throttle response, which is to have the small engine running at 100% full throttle, driving the supercharger, which will be sucking air through a throttle body, and that'll provide me with normal engine vacuum and hopefully pretty responsive throttle response. Off throttle response, when I chop the throttle, that's a little bit trickier. There's a fair bit of inertia there with that turbine spinning up. Fortunately, the big truck turbo that I'm using for a power turbine has an inbuilt wastegate, so I'm going to actuate that with manifold pressure, or rather intake pipe pressure. It'll be coming from the compound turbos, so that when I chop the throttle, the solenoid will open and power that wastegate with pressure, which will hopefully dump the flow or dump most of it out of the turbine. I may look at using another aircon pump on the output that also runs the alternator if I need more engine braking. That's got an electromagnetic clutch in it, so I can just fire that up and compress air into some sort of restriction, which will give me some more engine braking, or brake the engine rather, if I need it. I can also look at a second brake caliper on the rear that'll activate with some sort of solenoid or something when I close the throttle to simulate engine braking, and that'll be tunable as well. Obviously that's less than ideal because that's going to scrub out brake pads and wear out the rotor prematurely, but we'll see how we go with engine braking. I don't really know how it's going to work. yet. That's about all the questions I normally get. I'll show you what I've done today. Mostly just routing more of the exhaust. I've got spinning around here. I've got the two compound turbos routed up the back, running off the top one. I'm not real happy with how far this sticks out, but I think once I have the air-to-air intercooler that these compound turbos plumb through to get into here, I think that's going to take up a fair bit of that horizontal space, and it won't look so, I don't know, out of place. It looks funny to me. You can also kind of see what's going on with the, get my finger out of the way, with the transmission here. I'll show you this again. Episode 2 didn't really show very well, the light coming through kind of overexposed it. But here we have this blue box, this blue magic box is a worm reduction gearbox. It's a 10-to-1 coming straight off the power turbine, which outputs over to here. Here we have just two sprocket hubs face to face. This one has two Sprag clutches in it. Obviously the worm drive gearbox can drive but can't be driven, so this is an overrunning clutch that allows this to spin, so that when I chop the throttle we don't end up with shearing gears and things inside the worm gearbox. This pulley here is what's going to run the alternator and potentially more engine braking as needed, and then we come out here to this juggernaut go-kart torque converter setup from the States, which is running obviously the chain drive to the rear wheel. I've had to create the new backing plate. It did come with one, but I've had to make a new one because I need the chain drive on the outside. Normally it sits here behind the torque converter. Driven sprocket, driven pulley, and there just isn't space in there. You can also see that I've had to relocate the spring to run horizontally for obvious reasons, because yeah, that just wasn't going to happen. But that's about all the work I've done so far today. I kind of dummied up the seat, sort of got it sitting where I think it will work, and I'm looking at intercooler piping, or rather boost pressure piping. That's going to run through the air to water intercooler down to the front of the supercharger there. That's going to be a little bit tricky. I don't have an AC TIG welder, so I'm either going to have to get someone to do that, or these spikes are going to have more silicon in it than Dolly Parton. But we'll see what happens with that. Apart from that, not really a whole lot else that I've done. Today's the last day of my annual leave. I'll be back at work next week, so it's probably going to be just here and there on the weekend, but I'll try and put a video up every week to keep everyone in the loop of what I've done. People seem to like it, so happy to take a video. Any questions? Let me know. Otherwise, see you next time.